On today's Monday Night Travel, longtime Italy guides Colleen Schaffer and Rich Earl join forces to unlock their favorite Italian back doors. From sights in the Tuscan countryside, including the medieval Capalbio and culinary Modena, we head off to explore the hidden treats of Sardinia. Among other breathtaking highlights, we'll visit Cagliari in the south, Neptune's Cave in the west, and Calagonone in the east. Thanks for joining us.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Monday Night Travel. My name is Ben Green, and tonight I'll be hosting our discussion of a lesser-traveled Italy. Now, please join me in welcoming two longtime Italy guides and two of my favorite colleagues and travel mentors. First up is Rich Earl, who is a guide on our My Way Italy itinerary and a travel expert here in the office. Come on down, Rich.
Hi, Ben. How's it going?
Good. Thanks for taking the time to be with us.
Of course.
You went to Italy recently, is that right?
Yes, just this spring.
Excellent. Now I'd like to bring in Colleen Schaffer, who guides several of our Italy itineraries, and she is in our tour operations department here at the office. Hi, Colleen.
Hi, Ben. Nice to see you.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to see you as well.
Thank you.
So you went to Italy earlier this year, right? And you're going back again. Is that true?
Yes, I was there in the spring. I'm actually going there with my mother and daughter in August of all times, but it'll be great. And then leading a couple more tours from mid-October to mid-November.
Amazing. Well, I feel like I'm bookended by two travel encyclopedias here. So this is a treat for me as well as for all of you, I think. So both of you combined have nearly 50 years of experience here at Rick Steves Europe.
We both started when we were 10 years old.
Yeah, there you go. So could you tell me, perhaps starting with you, Colleen, what is a backdoor and what does it mean to Rick Steves Europe?
Backdoor is actually one of our signature phrases, and it dates back to when Rick was first traveling and researching his very first guidebook, where he was trying to find places that were on paths. So when he coined the phrase backdoor, meaning any place that wasn't already really popular in guidebooks and a place that was undiscovered.
Would you agree, Rich?
Yes, I would agree. Mm-hmm. And I think that's where he got the original name for the company, Europe through the back door.
Mm-hmm.
That's right.
Exactly.
Now, Rich, why are visiting backdoors beneficial when we travel?
I think they're beneficial because you get to see more of a real life slice of the country. They're not as touristy. Less people go there. Mm-hmm. Certainly less crowded, usually. Some of Rick's favorite or famous backdoors have become quite famous, like the Cinque Terre. You no longer can say that they're undiscovered, but they're still nice small towns that are not on the top tier places like Venice, Florence, and Rome.
I feel like you might be more likely to make an unexpected experience when you visit a backdoor as well.
Well, and I think it's important as travelers when you have a guidebook and you've got all sorts of references on the must-see places to visit, that you also take the time to discover your own backdoor, because there are so many places throughout Europe, but in particular Italy, that are undiscovered little gems that aren't necessarily in guidebooks, and they may not have any sort of real historical significance that made it into a guidebook, but those are some of the best places to visit.
So one thing you said there caught my attention. There are still, just to clarify, there are still backdoors and undiscovered places in Italy for travel.
Oh, absolutely. And I would say that many of them are very close to very popular, significant cities or towns. And so the way to get there is to just go out and explore and get off that beaten path. And also talking to locals. If you're talking to either a local guide or a hotelier or somebody in a cafe, asking them where their favorite vacation spot is, or where they want to go on the weekend, or what's close by, they're happy to tell you about the place that nobody knows about. And that's always the big gem.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's explore a few of these Italian backdoors that both of you have experienced and would recommend, shall we? There we are. So this is our Best of Italy itinerary. There are no backdoors here. I would love to join this tour. It's an excellent tour, but these are not the places we will be discussing tonight. In fact, none of the places we are talking about tonight are really, for the most part, in any of our tours or in our Italy guidebook. So I think that that makes this presentation pretty special. And just to show you a few places where we're going to talk about Sardinia, then we're going to talk about a few Tuscan towns, and then we're going to head further north to Bologna, Modena, Parma, and Bergamo. A fine smattering of recommendations from the two of you.
It's not necessarily an itinerary. So we've put together some of our favorite back doors, but we're not necessarily saying follow in this order. It's just an example of some of the back doors that you can discover as well on your own.
That's a great point, Colleen. Thank you. Let's start with Sardinia. Rich, over to you.
All right. So last fall, I went to Sardinia with a group of my friends, and I wanted to go there for a while because I always try to discover someplace new every time I go to Europe. I generally go twice a year. I do the same tours usually, the My Way Italy tour, the My Way Spain tour, but I always try to fit something new into it. So I spent about 2 weeks on Sardinia with some friends, and I did not get to see all of the island by any means. I didn't go to any of the kind of lackluster sites. So up in the northeast, you have the Costa Smeralda, that's one of the famous parts where a lot of rich and famous people go for vacation. And then down south, you have the largest city, Cagliari, and also Olbia. I didn't go to any of those places. I drove through them. I flew out of Cagliari, but I went to smaller towns that other friends of mine had been to and had recommended. So I started at Alghero. And one of the kind of challenging things for me in planning this trip was, how do I get to Sardinia? Because it's an island. It's not like Sicily is an island, but it's connected to the mainland. You can take a short ferry ride, and even the train goes on the ferry. Sardinia, there are boat connections that go from several locations. Like Cagliari, you can take an overnight boat to Rome, or actually to Palermo in Sicily. In the north, from near Olbia, you can take an overnight ferry to Rome. There are major airports in Cagliari, Alghero, and Olbia. So you can fly from various places in Italy as well as different European hubs. So for me, I flew from Seattle to London, spent a night in London, and then flew from one of the London secondary airports to Alghero. And then I spent 4 nights in several of these towns. So starting with Alghero, spent 4 nights there. And this was a nice city. It was a kind of a interesting mix of, it reminded me a lot of Spain. It used to be a Catalan port city. So a lot of the buildings and architecture kind of reminded me of Catalonia. Had a really nice old town with narrow streets, all encircled by a medieval wall. Very nice marine beaches. A lot of people might have heard of Alghero if you've seen any of the, he was named now, the travel, right? The travel, he has a travel show now, an actor.
Oh, is it Stanley Tucci?
Yes, thanks, Colleen. Anyway, he went to this restaurant on his one of his shows, and some friends of mine that I traveled with wanted to go here. You had to make reservations ahead. They don't have a set menu. So you go in or they have a set menu. You don't get to choose the menu. They basically, for 50 euros, it was, I think, an 8-course meal, all seafood. I'm not a big seafood fan myself, but this was probably one of the best meals I ever had. And this was tuna, fresh tuna, served with oranges and this just delicious sauce. It was amazing. But it was a whole huge meal, all the wine you could drink. It was not a place you could just walk in. From Alghero, there's several really nice day trips. We took a boat from Alghero up to Neptune's Cave, which I've been to a lot of caves in Europe and holes in the ground. I thought this one was pretty impressive. The boat ride up the coast. The coastline of Sardinia is amazing. Just these cliffs that come right down to the sea. And then the boat docks right into the entrance of the cave. And then inside there are these paths, and it's all well lit. Very nice, impressive cave system. And a beautiful boat ride from Alghero, maybe half an hour north on the boat. Another day trip I did was to the town of Bossa, which is south of Alghero. It's voted one of the most picturesque towns in Italy. Has the castle up on the hilltop. And from the castle's really just a castle shell, so there's not a lot to it. But the views from there are amazing, overlooking the old town. And the countryside around here sprinkled with olive trees, very dry. And then from there, I headed north to this group of islands called La Maddalena. And you can take a ferry from the town of Palau. There's 2 little ferries that go to the main city of Maddalena. Several of the other islands are national parks. You can't really get there except by private boat. But this island was a really nice little kind of vacation spot. Not a lot to do. Took a regular car ferry over. Didn't need to buy the tickets ahead. They go pretty regularly. And then docks in the main town of Modena. You can walk everywhere within Modena. And I had a rental car. You really do need a rental car, I think, on Sardinia. There is a train system that connects Cagliari in the south up to Olbia in the north, but it doesn't run very often. It's not very practical. The bus system is also not as extensive as it is in other parts of Italy. So, for instance, when I went to Bosa, the bus going in the morning wasn't bad, but in the afternoon, there was a huge lineup and you had to stand on the bus. But driving around La Maddalena with a car, you get to explore these little hidden beaches and coves, really nice swimming spots, and it has this really interesting rocky landscape. Looks very surreal. From there, I headed down the east coast to Calagonone, and this little town was quite nice. Some really beautiful beaches. This was the view from my hotel overlooking the town beach, really nice swimming beach. And then right in the main marina town, all these little houses here were renting boats or doing boat tours. So I was with some friends. One of my friends was a captain of a boat, so we rented this boat. He knew how to drive the boat really well, and we just drove down the coast for the day.
Great boat.
Going down to some of these amazing beaches, and plus the water was like a swimming pool. It's so warm. And you can't bring the boat right into the beach itself, but where these little buoys are, you can dock and then swim in. And it was just a beautiful day to be out on the water. Really nice landscape. And then all along the coast were these little caves that you could stop and go into and explore. From there, we headed south to the southern tip of the island, Villa Simius. And this was another kind of a beach resort town, pretty close to Cagliari. So some of my friends went into Cagliari for the day. I did not. But also here, the water is just surreal, very blue, very nice beaches, little beach bars. There was a saltwater estuary where they had all these flamencos, and then just lots of interesting landscape with these rock formations. And I thought it was a beautiful area.
Before we move on, Rich, I'm curious, did you get a sense of how Sardinia is different culturally than the mainland? Would you say it's fairly similar from what you experienced? Or
There are some things that are similar, but other things that are very different. I think before I went, I expected it to be a lot like Sicily, and it was very different than Sicily. It's one of the blue zones. Heard of those? Yeah. So a lot of people there have very long lifespans. And there's so much more to the island to explore than I went to. Some little villages inland. It's quite mountainous, and people live very kind of rural, rustic landscape lives in the landscape there. And there's a lot of really nice agriturismos from what I've heard. When I was there, it would be nice to go back and stay in some of those.
I always associate islands with like bastions of culture that maybe they're a little more protected and unique from the mainland. So I was just curious about that. That's really interesting. That makes Sardinia seem more appealing to me.
I think some of the interior hill towns would definitely be like that.
Okay, we'll move on to Tuscany. Colleen.
Perfect. So we are going to be crossing the Ligurian Sea just a bit, and we are going to be on the west coast of Italy here, starting with Capalbio, and we'll be heading up the coastline in this area. It's the province of Grosseto, and we're going to explore some of the hill towns that are very close to the water, and then we're going to go inland a bit, and we'll stop in Carmignano, and Carmignano is very close to Florence as well. So these are some lesser known hill towns, because many of us know of the hill towns that are in Tuscany, like San Gimignano or even some of the Chianti region. But there are so many undiscovered little back doors that you can visit. And so I'm highlighting just a few of those. So first, we're going to start off in Capalbio. Now, Capalbio is basically, it's in the province of Grosseto, and it is very close to Rome, closer to Rome than it is to Florence, even though it's a part of Tuscany. And if you looked at Capalbio on a map, or if you did any research, you might get really excited and say, oh, wow, I can take a train from Rome to Capalbio. This is true, but it's not. Like many other hill towns throughout Tuscany and beyond, it's really difficult to lay down rail tracks or have a train go up a hill town, correct? So quite often what you find is that the train is, its train station is down below. You can get to Capalbio by train, but then you have to take a bus that takes a good 45 minutes to an hour to get up to Capalbio. So my recommendation is to rent a car while you're in the Capalbio region. And one of the things that makes Capalbio so unique and so sweet is it is undiscovered. It also has sweeping views of the sea. So you can go up to the Torre, to the tower, and to the fortress in Castello of Capalbio, and you'll be able to see these wonderful sweeping views. You can walk the walls. So there are two walls, like many hill towns, it's fortified. And so there is a walk that you could take that leads you beyond this tower and goes around, and you can explore the town of Capalbio by hiking around the parameters of those walls. And one of the things that I find so unique about Capalbio and the region of Capalbio is that there's a lot to see and do in the town. The town of Capalbio is nicknamed the White Cape. And the reason for that is that there is alabaster that's quarried in the rocks in the ground all around Capalbio. Just like in Volterra, if you've ever visited Volterra, they have these so many alabaster quarries that they have a lot of workshops you can go to in Volterra. Well, Capalbio was nicknamed by the Romans to be the White Field and White Capes, and being closer than Volterra to Lazio and to Rome, they came up here quite often. But this alabaster and the soil also produces some amazing vineyards that have a lot of red and white wines that are wonderful, and even rosé. There are also places that you can explore outside of the town of Capalbio, the hill town. One of them is called the Taro Gardens. And so in the 1970s, there was a family, a woman of Vita, who was an artist, spent a lot of time in Spain, and was inspired by Gaudi. And she decided, and the tarot cards, which she claimed the tarot cards were first used or invented in Italy. I have no idea if that's actually true or not, but that's what she claims. And as an artist, she decided that this piece of land that was given to her, she was going to create this sculpture garden, this tarot garden. And so you can visit it, and it is about 10 kilometers outside of Capalbio. And everything, it's these mammoth sculptures that are made of colorful mosaics, and they all represent different images of the tarot. So whether or not you know anything about the tarot or you like the tarot, the sculpture gardens are pretty spectacular. The mosaics are beautiful. They have dragons, they have nymphs, they've got all sorts of things that you can visit. And so it's a fascinating place to go. And again, it's very close to the town of Capalbio, and really, really worth a side trip there. Now, also close-ish to Capalbio is that sea. As I mentioned, you can go up to the tower, and you've got this wonderful lookout of the vineyards around you, but also the sea. And the sea is about a 15-minute drive from the hill town of Capalbio, and there's a stretch that's 12 kilometers long of beach. And the wonderful thing about this beach is it is very uncrowded compared to many other beaches that you're going to find within Italy. And they're big sandy beaches. It's not pebbly beaches. And on top of that, it's a great place to bring kids because of the fact that the water stays shallow for quite a while. I brought my daughter and my niece here when we were here visiting a few years ago, but it's just a really wonderful area of the coastline that I would recommend going to. And again, if you decided to go to Capalbio by public transportation, you could take a train and a bus combo. From the train station in Capalbio, you can take a bus. It would be about 45 minutes to an hour to get up to the hill town. And you can also take a bus that would take you down to the sea. So there are ways to get around, but it's much faster and, in my opinion, more convenient to do this by car. And using that car, what you'll want to do is make sure that you've got that international driver's license, car rental ahead of time. I always like to get CDW insurance that because the collision damage waiver insurance means that anything that happens on these tight little roads in the hill towns, you're covered. And Rich, did you have anything that you wanted to speak about this traffic limito?
Yeah. One thing that people need to keep in mind is you can't really drive in the center of a lot of these little towns. It's only for the locals. So a lot of Americans who aren't familiar with this will drive sometimes. Florence is a good example. It's not even a small town, it's a big city, but you can't drive in the historic center of Florence. So I've had consulting clients who will contact me after their trip and say, hey, I got 3 traffic tickets, because I drove through this ZTL zone 3 times, and they don't realize it. They don't know what this sign means. So generally speaking, in Rick's books, if it's a town that we cover like Siena or Florence or San Gimignano, we'll tell you arrival by car. That's one of the nice things about our guidebooks is we really research those areas. But if you're traveling on your own and kind of discovering some of these little towns, you should assume you can drive in the center of them. I would park in a lot outside and walk in to avoid any issues.
And Rich, do you book your car rental ahead of time?
I always do, yeah. I always book my car a long ahead of time.
And Colleen, do you book the collision damage waiver insurance through the rental agency, or do you get it separate?
I usually book it through the rental agency. I just get it all at once. And they'll always ask you when you arrive too if you want the super coverage. And so that's personal choice, just how much insurance coverage that you want. But I usually get the max.
You can just walk away.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Here's your steering wheel. Have a good day.
That sounds like peace of mind. Yeah.
Exactly. So now we're going to head further up the coastline to another wonderful little gem that is Massa. And Massa Marittima is a really, really cute little coastal town that, as you can see, it's that quintessential hill town. And again, very undiscovered. But so much history behind it. It was actually, Massa was a very, very important hill town in the 13th century. This tower dates back to 1223. And if you take a look, you can see just behind the tower, there's a lookout area where you go back there and you can see the beautiful landscape, and you can even see the water from here. This is actually further north. You're getting closer up to the Ligurian, up to the Cinque Terre region when you're up here. But it is a beautiful surroundings. And I always start up at the top and then I work my way down. And my tour group came with me on this beautiful little excursion. And we went into the center to the Piazza Garibaldi. And once we were at the Garibaldi, I suggested that my group explore a bit. And one of my favorite things to visit, of course, is their church. Every Hilltown, no matter how small, always has a Duomo or a cathedral to visit. And this one in particular actually shows the influence that this town had, or how much it was influenced by the Pisans as well as the Sienese. So it's got Pisan Romanesque architecture down at the bottom, and then up above, you'll see more of a Sienese type of architecture. The interior is absolutely beautiful to visit. And so any of these little hill towns, go in, see the local churches, you'll learn a little bit about the local flavor, and you might actually run into a wonderful masterpiece by an artist that, you've seen some of his works in a museum in Florence or Milan, and here you are in a little tiny town, and you'll stumble upon a fresco or an altarpiece as well. So, and then of course you can continue walking along the town of Massa and see some of the landscape on the exterior around it. And one of the things, you saw all the vineyards that were surrounding this last photo. And one of my favorite things to do when I'm in Massa is to go to one of the enotecas, one of the little wine libraries, and try their local wines. And the favorite wine here is Vermentino. And I loved it so much that I brought it back to Florence. And I have a friend who lives in Scandicci, just outside of Florence. So we made homemade pizza. I will let a little bit of this Vermentino wine. And actually, one evening when I was in Massa, I was there with some friends. This is Alfio and Lisa and Karen. And we also had a bit of the Vermentino. The Vermentino is a white wine that you may have heard the name. They have it down in Sardinia. They also have it in this region of Tuscany. Anytime you're close to the sea, you'll find a Vermentino wine. And the reason what makes Vermentino so particular is it has that crisp kind of fruity flavor, but an undertone of salt. And I love salt. So it's from the sea. And so it has this nice little flavor of salt to it. And so I'm just now starting to see some Vermentino wines in the US, but throughout Tuscany, it's taken over. Pinot Grigio is now the unappreciated stepsister. Now it's all about the Vermentino.
Seafood.
Yeah.
Yeah, it really does. Now we're going to go a little bit more interior, not a little bit, a lot more interior. And we're going to be visiting the town of Carmignano. And Carmignano is about 20 kilometers from Florence. And Carmignano is famous for its olive oil, for its wines, and also for its figs from the fig trees. And since Roman times, since the times of Julius Caesar, they've appreciated the soil and how the soil has produced such wonderful wines in Carmignano and produced also wonderful olive oil. And the people of Carmignano say that the wines in Carmignano had the oldest DOC, the denomination of original control. So if you've ever bought a bottle of wine, you might see on the label where it says DOC, which means denominazione originale controllata, but it's denomination of original control, or DOCG, which means guaranteed. And so they say that it's the DOC here is older than anywhere else in Italy, and that is because there have been vineyards that have been regulated in Carmignano since the 9th century. So if you're a wine lover or you love olive oil, then I would absolutely recommend coming to this area. And what's such a treat is it's so close to Florence, and yet it really feels small and quaint, and you're out in the middle of nowhere. And one of the things that I love doing when I'm in Carmignano is I love to go up to La Rocca and to the Castello. So this, again, just like many other hill towns, it was once fortified, and this was used to be much, much larger. But you can hike up to the La Rocca here and to the clock tower, and you'll see wonderful vistas beyond. A lot of people will use the hiking trails to go up here. There's even a bike race that's held out in Carmignano, and so bicyclists will come out here and bike the hills around it. So it doesn't matter what time of year, you can come out here, and there's some wonderful trail markings, and it will take you up to these gorgeous olive groves and beyond. So definitely worth a visit if you're a hiker, if you're a bicyclist, or if you like to commune with nature, and then afterwards have a little bit of wine. And so these are close to the villa or agriturismo that I was staying at. There were I was surrounded by these vineyards. I was, yes. And you can see some of the Etruscan urns. I can't say for sure that this was actually an Etruscan urn, but it looks very much like one. And you can go down to the cellars and enjoy some of the wine that's produced in this area, and even some of the figs. So they the people in Carmignano also, one of the claims to fame, because they have some gorgeous fig trees there, is that they produce wonderful figs, and they say that they were one of the first to dry the figs within Italy and then produce those. So you can have some of the figs and a little bit of bruschetta and some of their wonderful olive oil and some of their red wines. We're having a little bit of their red wine tonight while we're having this discussion. So some of it's not as easy to find in the U.S. as some of the other more famous Tuscan reds, but you can find that you look for it. And then, of course, you can go into the center of town. And the town of Carmignano is just really quaint. Again, not very touristed at all. There are a couple of restaurants that have wonderful foods that are very famous of the Tuscan region. So you'd be able to find some of that ribollita or pici or bistecca or cingale, all of the things that are famous within Tuscany. And the other thing you can do is you can go into the local church. So I just mentioned when we were in most of it, the churches are in all of these hill towns. But this one in particular, this is the Church of San Michele e Francesco. It has a very famous work that was done. It is called the Visitation. And the Visitation actually represents the Mary, pregnant with Jesus, and her visiting her cousin, Elizabeth, who at the time was pregnant with John the Baptist. And this is so famous that the preparatory drawings are displayed at the Uffizi Gallery in Florence. But you walk in to this little tiny obscure town with this church, San Michele, and you walk in, you see this beautiful piece of art that is very, very important, that was done. It's in the Mannerist period. It was done in I think it was 1528 to 1530. And so just after the Renaissance period, there was a period that was called Mannerism. And so that is typical of this style. And so this is called the Visitation. Moving on.
So this was from my last trip. This is one of the few places, well, this is really the only place that we're talking about tonight that's in one of our guidebooks. So this is in Rick's Italy guidebook in the Tuscany chapter. It's one of the many agriturismo that we talk about. Is called La Brusciata. And I stayed here with my family for about a week. And it was really nice home base to explore the countryside and very relaxing. There are so many different kinds of agriturismo in Italy, from very basic farm stays to very high-end 5-star resort type places. And one of the nice things about them is they produce all their own food. So this place, I was here with my family, with my siblings and my nieces and nephews. We had a great time. It was their first time in Italy, and they just loved it. They just loved it.
They're lucky to go with you.
This was the first night we stayed at La Bruschetta. They make a dinner for you, and everything was made there on site. This was a tagliatelle with wild boar ragu. It was probably one of the best pasta dishes I've ever had. It was amazing. And then the whole countryside around there, just surrounded by vineyards. Lots of Vino Noble di Montepulciano is the main wine in this area, and they produce their own wine, which was so delicious. That was like €5 a bottle. So cheap. We did a couple wine tastings. This one was outside Montalcino, so this was the Brunello, and very good. I mean, and just you drive it. Usually you have to reserve wine tasting. It's a little different in Italy than it is here in the States if you go to California, for instance. But we just happened to stumble across this winery and asked if we could go in. We were the only ones there, and tasted some really nice wines. Right near the agriturismo was this little town, Montechiello, which is one of these little undiscovered hill towns. I had never heard of it. We just drove up to it. Of course, we didn't drive in because of the ZTL thing. But there was a parking lot right below that we just walked up a few steps, and this was the main gate to the town. And as we walked through the streets, there was hardly a soul around. Just a few little cafes and restaurants. Up at the top was the ruins of the castle there, but hardly saw anybody here at all. It was beautiful, beautiful spring day to go explore.
Amazing. Rich, do you need a car rental to go to an agriturismo, or will some of them pick you up in Florence, for example?
Some of them will, yeah. Some of them, if they're close to a train station. There's one that we list in our guidebook that's outside of Siena, and there's a small town, I forget the name of it, but in the book we tell you. And you can take the train there, and the owners will pick you up if you arrange it. But you're kind of stuck up there.
Yeah.
So a car, you really need a car, I think.
Exactly. There are some agriturismos. I mean, they really vary. Some of them have spas and pools and tennis courts and, everything you need. So if you're looking at just a relaxing vacation where you're not doing anything, then maybe if they can pick you up, then you can stay out there and they even have cooking classes. And so, maybe you can just stay out there and spend all of your time there. But if you really want to see the countryside or do anything outside of the agriturismo, it's probably best to have that car.
Yeah, I mean, the La Bruschetta, the one I was at with my family, they offered a cooking class, which my nieces did one night. And they had meals there that you could pay extra for, and you could do wine tasting there. So you could certainly spend a few days without leaving, but a car, especially for a week, would really be nice to get around.
Yeah, definitely.
I'm glad I had it.
Well, I think this is a good moment for a break to share some of the food we have tonight from the regions we're discussing. Rich, do you want to start with this here?
Yes. So this is one of the towns we're going to talk about. This is some different kinds of balsamic vinegar. So there's many kinds, but I have 2 kinds here. Doesn't look very appetizing because it's fallen off the cheese, but we have some cheese with 2 different kinds of balsamic vinegar. One that's kind of a high-end balsamic vinegar, a little more aged, and the other one is a little less expensive that you'd use for more.
That's nice. Can you show us the bottle, Rich? You have the big one there.
Yeah. So this one I just actually bought here at Metro Market. They sell it, but it was actually balsamic vinegar from Modena. And then this is one that I bought, the expensive one. I think this was €25 for this bottle. And I bought it when I was in Modena. I did a tasting there. And this was the one that I liked the best. I wasn't going to spend €100 all vinegar. But it's nice. Do you taste the difference of them?
Yeah. Delicious. Can I keep this for the rest of the meal? Can you do all the technical things while I bunch on this?
You can go right ahead. Yeah. So what's nice is you can put it on bread, you can put it on bruschetta, you can put it on strawberries, even ice cream. Add some balsamic vinegar on ice cream, which is really good. Vanilla ice cream.
Yeah. Especially some balsamic that is a little less expensive might have a little bit more of a bite to it, but when you go up the price range, it's so smooth. It's almost like a syrup.
Yeah. And we have some Sardinian crackers, right? Rich, can you hand me that there?
Yeah.
So we have the Carelli, I think is what it's called, right? And this is a fennel flavor. And this is carried by Whole Foods, at least sometimes, I believe. So you can find this in the US. And we also have, pardon my reach, a Sardinian flatbread, which is really, really nice. This is a rosemary flavor. And I think at least occasionally Whole Foods also carries this. Yeah. So you can find some of these delicious things around here. And then Colleen, you have a stunning plate. Okay.
So, well, it's been out for about a half an hour.
It looks wonderful still.
But this is a typical dish of northern Italy, which we'll be talking about later. This is bresaola. Bresaola is the cured beef, but it's a bresaola insalata. So it is a combination of the little cuts of the cured beef along with arugula and some, I prefer pecorino because I like kind of the saltiness of pecorino cheese, but you could really use Parmesan, any kind you want. And then you drizzle olive oil, that balsamic vinegar, squeeze a little bit of lemon. And if you wanted to add a sweet touch to it, you could add some strawberries or whatever you'd like to. But it's really quite delicious. And you'll find this in the Lombardy area. If you're up in Lake Como or Bergamo or any of those regions, you'll find that this is often on the menu. And it's refreshing and it has that protein too. So,
Can you say it one more time?
bresaola.
The smell is remarkable.
Yeah, it smells delicious.
I'm remembering why I like hosting these shows so much. I get hold on to the food. Well, we will enjoy this a little later. Thank you so much, Colleen. And then briefly, before we move on, I will just display this Vermentino, which this is the Tuscan white that you mentioned.
Yes, that's the one that has the little salty undertone to it.
And then it's here as well.
Yeah, I got this here. It's Vermentino. You'll find that in a lot of wine stores that import. And then this is the Carmignano, the Sanso.
And why don't we have a cheers to that? Thank you so much, the two of you. Salute. Good travel.
Attention, as the Italians like to say. Very nice.
Yeah, stunning.
Very nice.
Okay.
It's hard to go wrong with Italian wine.
Exactly.
I have a little energy to carry on now. All right, we are moving further north, and I think most of the rest of our itinerary can be done by train. In fact, we might recommend that it be done by train.
Absolutely. The town of Bologna, for example, you could drive in, but it's just so easy to take the train in. The train is centrally located right in the center of the historic area, and easy train connections because it's right on that main train line that goes up the spine of Italy that connects Venice, Bologna, Florence, Rome. So really easy to get to. Now, if you were to take that train, Italy has such a wonderful train system and that does connect you to almost any major hubs. So you can get, for example, between Florence and Rome several times a day, almost hourly. And it does take about an hour to get between the two. And then that train stops in Bologna and continues on up to Venice. So you can use Trenitalia. You can also use Italo, which is another one. And you can purchase these train tickets now on your mobile phone. Go on the website and purchase them online. Easy to do. And then you'll get a QR code. And the QR code then means that you don't have to validate your ticket. But if you're purchasing your train ticket at a train station, it is very important that you validate that ticket before getting on the train. Otherwise, you could incur a big fine. And you'll find these validation boxes at every train station. And it's kind of like those old-fashioned machines that people used to have to use when they were...
Time cards.
Time cards, that's what I'm
walking in and out of work.
Yeah, exactly. Very satisfying to think that click, too.
One thing I was going to differentiate is when you take the high-speed trains, the Freccia trains or the Italo trains, when you're buying a ticket, you already have a reserved seat for a specific day and time.
Yeah.
So those tickets don't have to be validated. And they can be really cheap if you buy them ahead, almost half price, but they're also non-refundable, non-exchangeable. Flexibility has a price. So it's not really a problem. I've never had a problem buying a train ticket from Rome to Florence on the spot. I don't know if you guys ever have.
No.
I've never had an issue. That would be about like $50 for a train ticket from Florence to Rome. But if you bought it ahead, you can get it often at half price. But again, you're saying, I'm going to go, on June 10th at 10:30 in the morning. You're not going to change it. If you're taking like a regional train going from Bologna to Modena or Parma, those trains are mostly regionale trains, and those are the ones you have to validate. Those you're buying a ticket, it's just for a day. You don't have a reserved seat. It's not even possible to reserve a seat. It's almost like getting on a bus. You just show up, get on the next train, and you're validating it before you get on the train or you're going to fly.
Yeah.
And that's the difference, right? Is that in other countries, even if it's a regional train without a seat reservation, it's still for that specific train. Whereas in Italy, you're buying, in this case, for example, a ticket that's valid the whole day, not just for one specific train. And that's why you have to validate.
I think most regional trains in most countries are not for a specific.
Okay.
Yeah. I know, I can't think of any that are. I know, like in Germany, Spain, France, you're just buying it really for that day. You can take, whether it's at 10 or 10:30 or 11, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
That's why you're validating it. So you're saying, I'm going on this day and you're getting on at this time. So you can't reuse the ticket multiple times.
Mm-hmm. So now that we're experts on train travel, let's take the train. And the first stop we're going to be making is in Bologna. Now, Bologna is not necessarily what we would say an undiscovered back door, but it is not in our guidebooks. It is really, though, one of these towns that is so accessible and has so much wonderful art and history that I would really recommend, if you're in central Italy, to stop here and wander through this beautiful city. And the city is actually nicknamed the Red City because so much of the architecture and the stone that's used to build the city is this wonderful, rich red tone. We're looking at the Fountain of Neptune here, which is right in the historic center and just surrounded by so many wonderful buildings. If you want to spend the night in Bologna, then I would take a look. I would reserve in advance, because the thing with Bologna is that they do have conferences at certain times of the year, and it's very likely that many of the hotels will book out during certain time frames. I believe it's April and October. But you can find a lot of really beautiful hotels in the historic center that are reasonably priced. I stayed here in April. This was at the Promenade, and it is just blocks from or not even blocks, it's a block from the center of Neptune, the piazza near the Fountain of Neptune, and really reasonable price. Their buffet breakfast was amazing, but wherever you stay, just reserve in advance, because you will save money and you'll be guaranteed to get a reservation. So the one thing that Bologna is famous for, beyond just the fact that the city is so red, is that they have porticos everywhere. And so you're walking down the street, you see these wonderful archways throughout the city, and just kind of lines all of the streets and areas. And along one of those porticos, you can find a really great place to visit, which is a library that holds manuscripts. There are manuscripts from medieval times and even ancient times. And this used to be a part of the University of Bologna. And Bologna has the oldest and probably the most famous university in all of Italy, and one of the oldest universities in all of Europe. And so you can go and visit this library, and you'll see all these fantastic manuscripts. And next to it, connected to it, is the anatomical theater. So it's a gorgeous room that is built like a theater in the round. And this is where it was a lecture hall where they would discuss anatomy, and have anatomical displays here as well, where the students would be here, and there would be a lecture series and learning about this. And so now you can go in, and I think it's just a few euros to go in and see a combination of the two, but really worth a visit. And so I would recommend this on any trip to Bologna. The other thing that I would recommend is, of course, Bologna is known as the foodie capital of Italy. So anybody who's a true foodie is going to want to spend some time in Bologna and try some of their food. And they really made fresh pasta. They put fresh pasta on the map. So whether it is the tagliatelle or the tortellone or the ravioli, you will find these shops that have just these huge displays and just massive amounts of different types of pasta that you can try. And we've all loved ragu with meat sauce, right? And there's a reason why they call it bolognese, because this ragu that is made with this meat sauce was first invented in Bologna. So I make my children spaghetti bolognese all the time. And so this is the ravioli bolognese, and really a typical dish to try when you're there.
I heard also that lasagna was invented there, but I also heard that it was invented somewhere in the South. So I don't know if that's true or not. Have you heard that?
I've heard that it's invented in Bologna, but I don't know if that's actually the case or not.
I've had some very good lasagna.
Me too.
Well, this
Yeah.
supports the claim that it's the foodie capital of Italy.
It is. The whole Bologna is actually not in Tuscany. It's in a region called the Emilia-Romagna. And Emilia-Romagna, I did hear, is where lasagna was first made. So I don't know if specifically it was in Bologna, but it's definitely the foodie capital. And this is where you really will find every kind of beautiful cheese, meats. There's markets everywhere that have this, and shops that are just mouthwatering. And now there's other places very close to Bologna that also have some wonderful mouthwatering.
Yeah. So right before COVID, I after my tours, I went up here to Modena, which is one of the cities very close to Bologna. It's about half an hour west. It's on the main train line between Bologna and Milan. So there's frequent trains that go back and forth. So I stayed here almost a week, and I really liked Modena. It was a really nice town, smaller than Bologna, seemed very untouristy to me. I was also there in October, which makes a difference, but I don't think that it gets as many tourists, certainly as Bologna does. All these beautiful kind of orange, red, gold colored buildings, lots of porticos, similar to Bologna. And one thing I found interesting was all the shops really catered to the local people, not tourists.
Mhm.
So you go into a shop, instead of postcards and little Pinocchios, you saw like shoes and pots and pans and things that people actually needed. Had a really nice market hall that I didn't see any tourists in here. All local produce, lots of good food. This is one of the things that makes Modena famous is balsamic vinegar. So it's what it's known for. You can do tastings of balsamic vinegar. There's right in the main square, or one of the main squares, there's a little shop owned by the tourist office where you can go on and do tastings. And then the other thing that it's known for is the Ferrari factory. There, you can tour that. Lots of beautiful cars, sort of the history of the Ferrari. Right in the town center, the main factory is outside of town. And it's also really known for tortellini and what are called giant tortellinis or tortellones. And they have them filled with all kinds of things. Meats, cheeses. Sometimes they're served in like a broth with chicken soup. Other times with like a pasta sauce on them. This was one that was in a lemon olive oil sauce, and it was delicious and very inexpensive. One of the most famous restaurants in the world, at least when I was there, Osteria Francescana, was I think at one time rated the #1 restaurant in the world. I don't know if that's still true, but it was right near the Airbnb where I stayed, and I happened to just walk by. I was taking a picture for a friend of mine who's a foodie, and they said, you're going to Modena, you've got to go to this restaurant. Well, you have to reserve this place like a year in advance. And while I was standing here taking a picture, the waiter came out to smoke a cigarette. He goes, "Oh, we're not open yet. You're too early." And I said, no, I'm just taking a picture. And he goes, "Oh, you don't have a reservation?" And I said, "No." And he said, "We've had a couple cancellations. You should have dinner." Oh, no. Yeah, but I was by myself, and you look at the menu, it's like 300 euros. So if I was with some friends and it was an event, I would have done it. But, when I can go and eat this for like, less than 10 euros, that's some little Nona made, it's really hard for me to justify going here. So I didn't do it. One of the day trips I did, so I did several day trips. I did a food tour that I just arranged the tourist office that took me into the countryside. And I got to taste some different kinds of cheeses and Parma ham, different kinds of balsamic vinegar. And then another day I took the local train into Parma and walked around. I went into Bologna another day and explored. Parma is a little bigger than Modena, very nice town center and known for Parmesan cheese and also Parma ham. Those are its two main claims to fame. Had a really nice lunch here with several different kinds of cheeses and different types of ham. Really nice place to spend some time. I mean, I was there almost a week. It flew by.
Remarkable. And Rich, you say you went to the tourist information office for that tour. Is that something you would suggest people consider doing? I actually haven't done that before.
Yeah, I think it was a really good way. There was one that because we don't cover it in our book, so I often will use Rough Guide or Lonely Planet as my second go-to. And Lonely Planet listed a food tour, but it was quite expensive. So I just went into the tourist office one day to get some maps, and I asked them, you have any food tours or like olive oil or balsamic vinegar tastings? And then she told me about the little office that was in one of the secondary squares. It doesn't cost anything to do a tasting there of the balsamic vinegar. And then she suggested this tour to me that I signed up for just like 2 days later. And I think it was around €100, maybe a little more. It was well worth it. Small minivan with maybe 5 other English speakers.
Very nice. That's a great tip. Well, shall we move on to the north?
Yeah. So now we're going to head further north, and you could go by train up to Milan and even to Bergamo. On my Best of Italy tours, we spend a lot of time up in the Lake Como area, in an area called Modena, and we go from there over to the Dolomites, which is just over in this region close to Veneto. And en route, a couple of years ago, I thought, well, I want to make a stop, and I don't know where I want to go. And a lot of times I'll use my tour members as guinea pigs. So, and I'll warn them, haven't been here, but let's all explore this together. And it was such a huge hit. I actually did this on my last tour last spring too. I brought my group, and they really enjoyed their time in Bergamo. Bergamo is, there's 2 parts, actually 3 parts to Bergamo. There is the large bustling city down on the main level. And then there's called the Alta Città, which is the upper hill town or the upper old historic area of Bergamo. And you can get up there a couple of different ways. You can take the funicular up, which is what we did, which is like a cogwheel, and it's fun to head up that way. And then you can also hike if you want. And you can even go a little bit further above. Hiking, when you're at the lower part of Bergamo, you'll find that there's a funicular station there. And sometimes there's some long lines. So if you're traveling on your own, you want to get a little bit of exercise, then I would absolutely plan on hiking up there. But if you wanted to take a little bit easier route and if it's a weekend and there's a couple of lines, you don't mind waiting for maybe 5 minutes, then take that funicular. But either way, go up to the Alta Città, and when you get up there, you're going to see these are the gates of San Giacomo. And this is a wonderful entrance. It's all marble, and around the upper Alta Città, there is a wall that is sort of a fortification. Now, it was the Venetians that ruled the area of Bergamo during the height of the Venetian Republic. And so a lot of what you see in Bergamo actually has an Venetian influence to it. When you go into the main part of the historic center of the Alta Città, Bergamo is known as the city of the many churches. And so there is the Church of Santa Maria Maggiore. There is, right next to it is the Duomo and also the Cappella Galeone. And these are just stunning pieces of architecture. And it really is. And when you go inside, you see all these ornate Baroque ceilings, and there's wonderful tapestries surrounding it, and all of this wonderful woodwork as well. So you walk in, look at the tapestries you see behind you here. And the tapestries became popularized in Northern Europe, around Luxembourg and Belgium, with the Flemish that really became experts at this, caught on down in Italy. And so you'll find a lot of tapestry, even in the Vatican Museum in Rome, you'll find these tapestries. But in the Church of Santa Maria Maggiore, they're covered in tapestry, and then this beautiful woodwork surrounding it. And when I was there with my group, I think a couple of years ago, we saw this artisan who was refurbishing some of the woodwork. And so you were able to stop and see what he was doing. It was just fascinating to watch. Now, once there's the Piazza Vecchio, which is where these churches are, and there's all sorts of restaurants and shops and little pizzerias and dessert shops and apartments and furniture stores, all clustered in this cute little upper town. And there's also a bell tower that dates back to the 1600s, and it was part of the Venetian influence. And it is also a market. So that's what we're looking at here. And then you will find just near this market a lot of restaurants. And this is the Prezzola that I just showed you. It looks a little prettier here, but then I'm not a chef, and the person who served this to me was. So this is, again, very typical of the Lombardy area. So it's the cured beef with the slices of shaved cheese, the arugula. And then this one, a lot of times they like to put some marinated artichoke hearts on top, or this one had marinated mushrooms. It was just delicious. And then you add pepper to it and some slices of lemon. And that lemon really brings out the flavor of the meat as well with the olive oil and the balsamic vinegar. And then something else from this region that, because again, this is northern Italy, so you're surrounded by either the Dolomiti, which is very Austrian influenced, or if you're over in Lake Como region, that's very close to Switzerland. So either way, you've got that northern influence. And so one of the things that the people in this region love to eat is a dish that's called pizzoccheri. And pizzoccheri is a very, very hearty buckwheat pasta. And then it's served because you can't have enough carbohydrates with pasta, so they also will add boiled potatoes that are sliced up with it. And then cheese, some sort of vegetable, and a little bit of olive oil. And it's just delicious and really hearty, and something that is very particular to this region. So if you're anywhere in northern Italy, then I would really recommend you try the pizzoccheri. But Bergamo is just a quaint town that is easy to get to and has such a wonderful combination of a bustling large city down below and this historic area up above that has all these beautiful architecture and art. And you can walk around the walls and get gorgeous vistas and views. So really worth a visit.
And it has an airport where a lot of budget airlines fly. So you can fly from many places in Europe there.
Yeah, very, very true. Oh, yeah. And here we go. This is one of the vistas that you can see when you're looking at those walls. So yes, I would absolutely, at any time of year that you're visiting. I've been here spring, fall, and even winter. And it's just a beautiful town to visit.
Rich and Colleen, I loved hearing about your trips here to these excellent back doors. You know, I saw these slides, of course, ahead of this presentation, but it means so much more hearing what you experienced and how you did it and what you suggest for people. So that was just wonderful. Thank you so much.
It was a nice little trip down memory lane.
It was. And I would encourage anybody who's traveling, not just to Italy, but everywhere, just go out there and explore. It's fun to go out and get adventurous and discover things that may not necessarily be in a guidebook. And so get those recommendations from locals. And a lot of times you can, when you're in a town too, you can go into a restaurant or a cafe and ask them, you know, what's your favorite thing to see here? What should I do while I'm here? And locals, especially in towns where they're not used to a lot of tourists, they love to give their opinions and suggestions.
Excellent tip. Well, we aren't quite finished with our back doors this evening because I asked Cameron Hewitt, our director of content and a co-author of a number of our guidebooks, to share one of his favorite Italy back doors. And I love the little piece that he recorded for us on Trieste, which I have gone through. Have either of you been in Trieste?
Yeah, on my way to Slovenia. Stop there.
Let's take a look at what Cameron has to say about this interesting city.
Hi, everybody. I'm Cameron Hewitt. I'm the content director and also a guidebook co-author at Rick Steves Europe, here to share one of my favorite lesser-known Italian back doors. And that is up in the northeastern corner of Italy. It's actually surrounded on two sides by Slovenia and one side by the Adriatic Sea. And it's the great former Habsburg port city of Trieste, or Trieste, as they say in Italian. I got to finally go there after hearing about it for many years recently. And I just found it a really fascinating place, culturally, historically, great food, interesting sights. We've got a few pictures I'd love to show so you can get a taste of what Trieste or Trieste looks like. And as I mentioned, you can see Trieste is at the end of this long finger of land that sort of sticks out from Venice. And there's Slovenia on two sides and the Adriatic on the other side. And it was a highly strategic location back during the days of the Habsburg Empire. Actually, the Habsburgs built Trieste as one of their major shipping ports. So it was a very powerful and important city, a maritime city. But because of this unique history, today it's part of Italy, but it has a lot of cultural ties and historical ties to Slovenia and to the Habsburg Empire, including Vienna and Budapest. So it's really an eclectic cross-section. It's Italy, but it's not exactly Italy. It looks very beautiful, maritime city as you see here, but it also has some really grand architecture that looks like it would be more at home in a place like Vienna or Budapest. You really feel like you're in one of these great cities of Central Europe, even though you're on the Adriatic in Italy. Lots of beautiful architecture. It's a beautiful city just to stroll around. Interesting buildings. This is a gigantic Orthodox church that you can step inside that's right on that canal that I was showing you. Lots of beautiful mansions. You imagine this was a great shipping city. So incredibly wealthy merchants and shippers and people who ran businesses. Ely coffee comes from Trieste, for example. There's all sorts of commerce here. So it's interesting to go into some of the mansions and great stately residences of Trieste and see the opulence of that day. And it also feels a little bit closer to Vienna because there's a lot of coffee culture there. And in fact, this is a famous cafe in Trieste, which is very much in the secession style. Again, something that you'd be more likely to see in Vienna than you would in Italy. And yet here we are. Italians think of Trieste as one of the great coffee cities of their country. You can get Italian food here. It's the cuisine, like the culture in the city itself, is a mix of different influences. You can get a really good Italian meal with typical kind of pastas, but I also went to this restaurant that was recommended to me by the co-author of our Italy for Food Lovers guidebook that had more Austrian flavors. This is a soup called jota, which is a really heavy kind of a sauerkraut soup that actually originated in Slovenia, which is right next door, of course. And this place also specialized in different forms of pork. So it was very kind of a heavy, meaty, again, Austrian style meal, even though I'm here on the Adriatic in Italy. But this is the reminder that this is also, on top of all of that stuff that feels like it should be several hundred miles to the east, this is also a beautiful city where you can look out over the Adriatic. Off to your right, as far as you can see, Italy stretches towards Venice. If you look to your left, you've got Slovenia's tiny little coastline, and beyond that, you can actually see Croatia from here as well. So it's really at the apex of cultures here in the northeastern corner of the Adriatic Sea. A really beautiful place to spend time. Also a really interesting place for its literary connections. This was the city where James Joyce lived during a lot of the time that he was writing his famous book, Ulysses. There's a great little James Joyce museums there in this city. Actually, I learned that one of his neighbors in Trieste was a model for the character of Leopold Bloom, who was the protagonist of Ulysses. So if you're a literary fan, this is an interesting place to go. And speaking of literary, there's a beautiful book that came out several years ago that I'd always heard about. And when I knew I was going to Trieste, I decided I should finally read it by Jan Morris. It's called Trieste and the Meaning of Nowhere. It's a beautiful book that's sort of a memoir about the city of Trieste and also about the author's own life and how those two things were intertwined and how in a lot of ways Trieste felt to the author like it represented her journey through life. There's a lot of cities that are tied to a particular literary work, and I would say if you're going to Trieste, you should definitely read Jan Morris's book. I kind of ended up using it almost as a guidebook when I was there. There were some places that she described that I enjoyed reading through her eyes, even though it was 30 years later or so. I felt like I had a guide, a literary guide through the city of Trieste. Well, I hope that this inspires you to consider a city that doesn't show up on a lot of itineraries these days, but it has a really fascinating mix of history and culture and cuisines, and yet it's fully in Italy as well. I think it's a great choice, especially if you're going to be up in that part of Italy near Venice, or if you're going to Slovenia or Croatia even, it's just right there. Enjoy your travels.
Always great to hear from Cap. And I actually remember, I haven't spent any time in Trieste really, but I went through it on a Flixbus. And I do recall being very impressed by the architecture at the very least. So I would really like to spend more time there in the future. So we've actually had back doors from a large area of Italy now, haven't we? From Sardinia onto the mainland there across up to the north. So I will, before we get to a Q&A, because Gabe has been sending me many excellent questions, I'm going to share our word from our sponsor this evening, which is related to back doors. It's our Europe Through the Back Door t-shirt. And on the back, we have some of our early Rick Steves back doors. And this map was created by our cartographer, Dave Orline, and he actually made the maps that you've seen here tonight. They're from our Italy for Food Lovers book. So if you're wondering why they have some food-related comments on them, it's because they're from one of our books that you can buy on our website, Italy for Food Lovers, that Rick co-authored. So yes, you can see the front here as well. It's our vintage design. It's actually on sale right now as well for $15 on our website.
It's
That was our original logo.
It was.
yeah, from 1980. Yeah.
Mhm.
Classic. All right. Well, are you both ready for some Q&A?
Absolutely.
Sure.
Okay. See what I can hit you with.
Fire.
From Keith, Colleen, I'll go to you. What's the best way to get multiple bottles of wine back to the U.S.?
I like to wrap them up in my dirty clothes and put them in my suitcase. You can,
can
you
do
can bring, yes, you can.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's cheap.
it is the cheapest way to do it. It's actually really expensive to ship back in the US. You'll go to a lot of wineries and they'll offer to do that for you. I would ask them if they export to the US because what I normally do is I will choose 2 to 3 bottles that I absolutely want to bring home with me. And I will wrap them up in my luggage. And then I will decide whether or not it's worth it to pay the money to have others shipped. And again, if you ask them if they export, you might be able to find them here in the States.
And I think it's only worth it to have it shipped if you're buying a half case or a case of wine.
Yeah, certainly.
Rich, Susan asks, are there age limits for driving?
I think they're more restrictive on young people than they are older people. I get a lot of questions from travelers about that. And I think it depends on the person. Certain car rental agencies might be more restrictive towards elder drivers, but I would call the agency first and ask. I know Auto Europe is a consolidator that we often recommend.
Mhm.
And you're actually renting through Arts Avis or another major car agency. And you actually enter your age and information in the website, and it would tell you if you had some kind of restrictions. It's very rare that I've seen it for elderly people. I mean, if you were an older person who could barely see and walked with the cane and walked into the car rental office, they might then say something to you, but it tends to be more restricted towards younger people. Like if
Is it
you're
25? Is it-
25.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you were like a 21-year-old, a group of your friends coming to rent a car, they're going to be much more hesitant to rent it to you.
I know it's 25 because I could start renting just a few years ago. Like to be old enough to do that, though, for your travels. Jamie is curious. Pauline, I'll turn to you for this one.
Mhm.
Can small towns, like some of the places we discussed tonight, accommodate dietary restrictions?
Well, it depends, I guess, on what the dietary restriction is. But if it's gluten-free, for example, or yeah, you just want to talk to your waiter at the restaurant. And what I often do is I'll use, if you don't speak Italian, is use Google Translate and just let them know if you've got any allergies or any restrictions. And you can just type that right into Google Translate and use your speaker, or just show them this and they'll let you know what they can do for you. But the kitchens are usually really open to helping you out. And you'd be amazed in the last 10 years how many restaurants now accommodate lactose intolerance or gluten-free, or it's a changing environment as far as that goes.
Beck is curious, Rich, if you remember, what was the name of the restaurant that you ate your great seafood meal at?
Bob Beckett and Billy. To look at the slide again.
Say it again.
Maubak, I believe. Yeah, we could look at the slide to see.
Very nice. Let's see, what else do we have here? Only
Oh, and one thing I forgot to mention about that restaurant, that dish had carrots in it. It was tuna and carrots with an orange sauce, which seemed like a very strange combination, but it was probably one of the best meals I had on that trip. It was amazing.
Colleen, Mary Rose is curious if these backdoor towns in Italy are also good places for Italians to live.
Oh, absolutely. You know, there's I just got my dual citizenship. My husband is obsessively looking at different locations throughout Italy to find real estate. And I think there's a website called Idealista. Anyway, that they will, there's a lot of them that will list real estate offerings, and these cute little backdoor out of the way places are the way to go.
A lot cheaper.
Yeah, they're much cheaper than if you were to look at selling. If you want to be by the water, for example, Cinque Terre is going, or Amalfi Coast are going to be much more expensive real estate than if you're looking along Grosseto, which is the region that we lived at for Capalbio and Massa.
Colleen, Lance asks if you have any resources for people wanting to learn Italian.
I would say if you wanted to just do this during your free time as you're standing in line at the grocery store, Duolingo is a great place to start with vocabulary and basic grammar. And then after that, I would say the way I really progressed with my Italian, I'm still not fluent, but I learned a lot by getting a tutor one-on-one. So there are a lot of people out there who are willing to tutor you, and that's it forces you to speak it. So a class with, say, 30 people or even Duolingo, they're great, but you have to have that one-on-one experience. And I learned that just by speaking and allowing myself to make mistakes is the way to go. And Rich, you're fluent in Spanish, so I'm sure that you have a lot to say about.
Yeah, I mean, if you can, the way I got fluent in Spanish was living there and doing like an immersion program. And not everybody can do that, but I think a lot of people, as they retire, have more time on their hands. And that would be a really good way to spend a vacation. You to go to Italy and do like a month-long language immersion. You could do that in many places: Siena, Florence, Rome.
The key is, though, maybe even to go to a place that, unlike Florence, where there's so much English spoken, to go someplace where you're not going to be able to speak at this moment.
Perugia, I think, has a lot of language schools.
Yeah.
Oh, that would be fantastic. No, I would love to do that. Okay, Rich, Dick asks, on a related note, is English widely spoken in some of the towns we discussed tonight?
Yes. I'd say it's pretty much throughout Italy. Further south, though, I'd say like in Sicily, I noticed it a lot less, and also some of the, like the Basilicata, those areas, not as many people speak English.
However, Italians love it when you try. Now, if you're in a large city like Milan and you're trying to practice your Italian in a bustling restaurant or cafe, they're probably not going to be as open to letting you practice. But in these smaller little towns, if you know 10, 15 words and you try them out, they're thrilled, and they'll help you struggle through. And they may correct you at times, but it's really nice to be able to just know a few words, use that Google Translate if necessary, but they'll work with you. They may know very little English, you may know very little Italian, but they make it work. And they're really happy that you're trying.
Yeah, they're very happy you're even attempting.
Yeah.
Okay, I will ask just one final question, and Rich, I'll start with you. Comes from George. What is your favorite Italian back door? It could be one we discussed tonight. It could be a different one.
I would have to say I really liked Alghero on Sardinia. I really liked that town a lot. It was really a nice city, a smaller city, and lots of good food, close to the sea, several day trips, that you can take, easy to fly into from any number of places. So I really liked it.
Colleen?
Well, I think it's probably where my family's from. I went there with my mother years ago and just found it enchanting, but I'm sure nostalgic at the same time. But it's Fondi di Sprolonga, which is about an hour south of Rome and an hour north of Naples. It's right between the two. So it's quaint, and it's up on a hill, but it's very close to the beach. It's near Sprolonga, which is a really popular coastal town. Romans love to go there.
That is fantastic.
Yeah. Well, Rich and Colleen, I'm so grateful that you were willing to spill some of your secrets to me and everyone else traveling tonight. So thank you very much again for taking the time. And I will reward you with the remaining food and drink we have. And to everyone who traveled with us, thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed hearing from Rich and Colleen on just a few of the many backdoor places that still exist in Italy. And next week, we have a very fun show that I hope you'll join us for. It's going to be a history of Olympics in Europe. And we even had our first MNT Olympiad. So if you join us next week on Monday, you will hear more on that. Good night, Rich. Good night, Colleen.
Good night.
Good night, everybody.
See you.